Hey, happy Thursday, Eastern Carolina. We continue to track the tropics here after a quiet July. That tropical wave in the greater Antilles continues to show slight signs of development. So over the next few days, we're going to do daily updates here on our Facebook Live and YouTube. So feel free to subscribe or follow along here. Again, we'll try to do that here over the next few afternoons. Very fluid situation here, and outputs from the models continue to change from run to run. So you're going to want to keep an eye on the forecast, but there are some changes that we are tracking. So we'll get right into it here. Right now, the National Hurricane Center has officially made this tropical wave an invest, so it's officially invest 97L. There is no center circulation. In fact, you can see the pressure is at standard pressure, 1013 millibars, and moving to the west-northwest around 23 miles per hour. And zooming in a little bit on the satellite imagery, you can just see how disorganized it is. Just a cluster of thunderstorms, somewhat seeing broad circulation, but that is, again, that tropical wave that we continue to track right there. So no close circulation. That's important because once it does potentially develop a closed circulation, models will have a much better idea as to where this thing may go and how much it will intensify. But trends are starting to become a little bit more concise here. So we'll go into the changes in the forecast. So again, broad area of cluster of thunderstorms here over the next few days. And we are tracking a few different scenarios. So yesterday we were somewhat debating, does it move to the Atlantic side with an earlier development, which would pass off our shores, or does it move further west into the Gulf, which means a later development? And things are becoming a little bit clearer here that a later development is more likely within this storm. So we're going to go through what the GFS has. So as we head throughout the next couple days, development isn't likely because it's interacting with Hispaniola, the greater Antilles, very mountainous region here, and it's still somewhat wrapped around some dry air, gaining moisture though. So Friday into Saturday, it continues to push west through the greater Antilles. Again, very mountainous terrain, so we're not expecting quick development with it until it reaches the Gulf of Mexico. Once it gets out of a mountainous region, it could have some fuel to quickly develop as it heads into the Gulf. Again, that is what models have been trending towards, that Gulfward, westward shift. So we'll see what that can mean here as we head into the end of the weekend. This is the GFS model, again, just one of many different runs. We will be tracking a few different steering flows here, primarily this big high pressure for us that could potentially slow down that area of low pressure and give prolonged impacts to the Florida Panhandle and areas along the Gulf of Mexico. But certain changes in the forecast are possible as well. A very fragile system where all it takes is for this ridge off to the west to not be as present or to be just a little bit further west, and this thing could possibly transition over to the Atlantic side of Florida. And this current model run has it meandering around Florida. But we will also have to keep an eye out for a more northward shift after it transfers over to the Atlantic side of Florida. So a little confusing here. I know it's, again, going to be a fluid situation over the next couple of days. You want to take each model run with a grain of salt, likely until the weekend when we get that closed circulation. But here's a few different scenarios, just going through it one by one. First of all, the National Hurricane Center still only has a 60% chance of development over the next 7 days. And this map can be a little bit confusing. But this area here, the polygon, is just potential area of development, where it may start to develop. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to see the track follow along that polygon. But as you noticed, this blob has shifted a little bit further west. So again, that indicates that Gulfward turn and that westward shift instead of that shift up the Atlantic towards us. That doesn't mean we're out of the woods. At the very best, it means we get to save some time here, depending on how it plays out. So there's just the National Hurricane Center numbers. Again, nothing has developed. Likely won't develop until at least the start of the weekend into Sunday. And once it does, may take on a tropical depression or a name, and models will have a much clearer picture as to what will happen. But a few different scenarios. The best scenario for us will be the stalling out scenario. As it runs into high pressure to the north, it doesn't really have anywhere to go, and it just meanders around Florida. Unfortunately for the Panhandle, that could provide not good impacts for the Florida Panhandle in terms of heavy rain, flooding, and wind But again, those impacts stay to the south for us here in Eastern Carolina in that scenario. And there's a couple other scenarios, like I said, transitions it over to the Atlantic and lifts north, could pass off our shores. So again, that doesn't mean we're out of the woods. But there's another slim scenario where it rides up the 95 corridor. And if that happens, we're on the east side of the storm, and that just traditionally brings the potential for some soaking rain, some gusty winds, and some storms present with that as well. Again, on that east side, that yellow scenario, depending on the intensity as well. A little bit further east, where we would call it a closely offshore scenario, that was also not a good scenario for us here in Eastern Carolina. Even though we're not on the strongest of the winds side of the storm, and we're not on the heavy rain side of things, we would have to watch out for the winds out of the north and northeast. As you know, if you live here, northeasterly winds that are persistent or strong can back up some of our rivers and sounds. So the yellow and orange scenario that you see here are not necessarily the best scenarios. This is all going to change, and this is all going to vary based on the intensity of what happens as well. So because it does look like it is going to shift into the Gulf of Mexico just a little bit more than earlier, that does buy us some time. Yesterday we were talking about a Monday to Wednesday time frame. If it were to transition onto the other side of Florida, again, on this side and possibly move up towards us, it would be more so mid to late next week or even into the following weekend. So the good news is we do have some time to actually collect the data and have a better forecast and pinpoint, somewhat pin the tail on the donkey is what we like to say. So again, stay with us here. We will give updates online on Facebook, YouTube over the next couple days via live stream. And tonight, meteorologist Donnie Cox will be back in for the 5 and 6 o'clock shows on News 12, and he'll have the latest numbers with that as well. But again, just take a look at this graph. These are somewhat three primary scenarios that could give us a varying wide different amount of impacts. So want to stay tuned. Of course, you always be prepared for hurricane season. Have that preparedness kit ready. Stay close attention to the forecast. I'm meteorologist Grant Carlton, and we will see you soon at 5 o'clock. See you soon at 5 o'clock.